I would categorize artwork from the interwar and World War II years to be imaginative and abstract. Like the movements outside of art brut, magic realism, surrealism, and Bauhaus. Also, artists started reflecting back in time and it showed in their art. For example, some art was classical Roman European style, like the movements interwar classicism and the Mexican mural period. Artists also reflected back to realism and started painting scenes from their everyday lives, from both urban and rural areas. You can see this in American regionalism, the 14th Street, and the social realism period. The Harlem Renaissance was a category of its own because I believe it fit into all the categories. In my opinion, art from this era was imaginative, classical, and realistic. Outsider art, art brut, magic realism, surrealism, and Bauhaus were similar movements because they were dreamlike and imaginative. When I see the art from those periods, I can see how the artists were externalizing their inner feelings and emotions. In some works, you can see vibrant colors, and others more dark, morbid tones. The art gives a glimpse into the artist's perception of the world and the mysteriousness of their thoughts. I'm curious to know what the artist's state of mind was, and I want to get an idea of the imagination that the artist possessed. For example, the painting The Human Condition by Rene Magritte. This painting is a painting inside a painting. It looks odd from first glance, and you realize what the artist is representing. You can hardly tell where the painting begins and the scene begins because he was so exact with the details. I find his insight original and unusual because what type of person would think about painting something like this? The second category would be classicism. I see this in interwar classicism and in the Mexican mural period. Artists stepped back from innovational modern style and made their work symmetrical and flamboyant, like the neoclassical ancient art, but with their own modern look. A good example of this would be Mother and Child by Pablo Picasso. The work is Roman style, but you can tell by her clothes she is wearing a white tunic. Her hair is pulled back, and both her and her baby's features are distinct but calm, followed by a soft flesh tone color and muted palettes. The third category would be realistic. I would describe the 14th Street American regionalism and some of the art from social realism as realistic. The Great Depression brought a change of life in both rural and urban communities. Artists from the regionalism period were ready to go back to their roots, and they rejected modern art. Social realism and the 14th Street School artists used their art to help fight capitalist profiteering for the lower class, union workers, and laborers by either making figurative or realistic images. They shine light on the disadvantaged and depicted the grittiness of everyday life because they were tired of their people being taken advantage of. But those periods had something in common, and that was they were depicting real life images. For example, the Railroad Station Waiting Room by Raphael Sawyer has a dreary feel. You can sense the boredom of life as the individuals wait for their train. It depicted average American workers and a mother separate from other well-dressed people. The Harlem Renaissance was a broad period, and I think it contained imaginative, classical, and realistic art. Artists classically reflected their African roots and promoted Egyptian paintings and sculptures. They also depicted their struggles, but in creative ways, as well as scenes from their ordinary lives. For example, the painting Campfire in the Park by Buford Delaney depicts homeless people in a park gathered around a fire. The painting has a Fauvism feel to it. It is colorful yet compassionate. The painting did not receive proper recognition because artists were constantly faced with racism. In conclusion, I believe the nature of this era was imaginative, classical, and realistic. The artist's tones changed in response to World War II and the Great Depression, It was an involuntary response, but it caused artists to create new abstract ideas, look back in time, and reassess their current situation. My two questions for my audience is, in your opinion, out of all the movements, which movement was inspired the most from World War II? And was there any movements that seemed to speak out against the war? And in the paintings that were realistic, why was it important to the artists to depict the lives of their people? Thank you.